Mr. Speaker, the President of the United States.
Not since President Lincoln and the Civil War have freedom and democracy been under assault at home as they are today. What makes our moment rare is that freedom and democracy are under attack both at home and overseas. Israel must allow more aid into Gaza. Humanitarian assistance cannot be a secondary consideration or a bargaining chip. The only real solution to the situation is a two-state solution over time. My predecessor and some of you here seek to bury the truth about January 6th. Here's the simple truth. You can't love your country only when you win. Those bragging about overturning Roe v. Wade have no clue about the power of women. And with all due respect, Justice, women are not without electoral power. I've been told I'm too old. My fellow Americans, the issue facing our nation isn't how old we are, it's how old are our ideas.
Some of the key moments from President Joe Biden's hour-long State of the Union address last night, and it gives you the sense of the issues he addressed and the tone he struck. Our Washington correspondent, Alexander Panetta, was up late writing an analysis piece for you that you can find on our website, and he's up early to share some of his insight with us. So it's always great to see you, Alex. Thanks for coming back this morning.
Good to be here. Thank you, Heather.
Everybody was talking yesterday about how the stakes for this State of the Union address were so high that this would be the most consequential speech of Joe Biden's presidency. How did he do you think?
Well, I mean, it all depends on your expectations. I mean, listening to some of the rhetoric here in the United States in the weeks leading up to this speech, the expectations have been set so low that if he walked out onto that stage and read from a teleprompter without toppling over, it would have been a success story. And he did just that, and more than that. I mean, he was energetic. He, to the point that the story after the speech, he had Republicans, his opponents, talking about how he was shouting and almost was too feisty. So by that metric, he certainly surpassed expectations. But I mean, let's put this in its proper context. I mean, he was essentially reading a speech, and a couple of times he ad-libbed, and he ad-libbed with some success, mixed success. At one point, he got someone's name wrong. He got a couple of details flubbed in some attempts to ad-lib. But generally, like I said, if the expectations were a rock bottom, he surpassed them very easily. And frankly, probably did a little bit to reassure his base at the very least, because Biden has really two problems. He's got a problem with some skeptical people within his own party, and he's got a problem with independents. Well, I think he probably did a little bit to reassure members of his own team, Democrats, that he's up to the challenge of fighting a re-election.
I mean,
campaign.
that was one of the big questions, reassure that he's up to it. In terms of the age, which everybody is addressing directly now, he took it on directly with some humor. We played it early in the morning. I may not look like it, but I've been around a while. I mean, everybody chuckled away. Did he answer the questions, Alex, about whether he's mentally and physically fit for another 4 years?
Another 4 years, I don't know, but he certainly was mentally and physically fit enough to survive an evening in the House of Representatives. Again, capable of doing that spontaneous repartee with hecklers in the crowd, capable of reading the speech with energy and vigor. And yes, capable of addressing one of the voter concerns about him, which is his age and his vitality. And he doesn't talk about this too often, but he did it in a pretty humorous and delicate way, joking about how he's been called too young in his career. Now he's being called too old. Remember, he was elected at age 29, so he's seen the age question from both ends. And I think, I wrote this analysis piece today that talks about 4 things he tried to do last night as a sort of a blueprint for his re-election campaign. And one of them is addressing the age question. And I think he did that in a way you're likely to see more often, which is to address it in a humorous way, delicately, probably not very often, but to do so in a way that comes across as endearing and charming.
He also addressed a number of key issues, and I'd like to talk about a couple of them specifically with you. One of them, abortion and reproductive rights. And he said that if Democrats win Congress, he will restore Roe v. Wade as the law of the land. He said that, Alex, right in front of the justices who overturned it, which was quite audacious, maybe. I don't know how you saw it. But in terms of addressing it, the moment and the signals, how is he going to be dealing with this issue?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And what's interesting about these speeches is they've become a lot more interactive. If you'll recall, about a decade ago, a congressman from South Carolina, Joe Wilson, heckled President Obama, saying, "You lied," back, and that's now considered completely standard for these speeches. They, people in the crowd heckle, the president answers back. It's become more like a spontaneous campaign event. What's really unusual is to see the president invoking Supreme Court justices and kind of taking them on. Biden quoted a piece of that Dobbs decision that struck down Roe v. Wade, and in that decision, and Justice Alito wrote that women are not without electoral power, making the point that this can be decided in the forum of public opinion and in politics. It doesn't have to be, abortion rights don't have to rest on Supreme Court protections. Well, he quoted that decision saying, you better believe women have political power, and they've shown you. They've shown you in 2022, where we, Democrats held the Senate, almost kept the House, defying all expectations. They've been outperforming expectations in special elections, by-elections ever since then. And basically, the point Biden's making is, this fall, women will show you the power they have. And clearly, he wants to make abortion a central issue in this election. And we saw that last night, right? The issues he focused on at the beginning of the speech: abortion, protecting democracy, pocketbook issues, federal programs to support people. These are the things he wants to talk about. The stuff he's kind of worried about, the issues where he's playing defense, were kind of tucked into the bottom half of the speech.
He actually began the whole thing with the whole issue of freedom and democracy in America being under threat, both from outside but also from within. And he referenced several times, history is watching, and this particular moment. What do you think he was trying to do there specifically, Alex?
I think he told us right off the bat, right? I think it's interesting that he invoked Franklin Roosevelt at the beginning of the speech. And he invoked Franklin Roosevelt, not just because Franklin Roosevelt was also extremely old when he was president. After winning his fourth term, you could run for four times back then. He died in office, literally. And not just because Franklin Roosevelt is beloved in his own time and today. That speech Roosevelt delivered in 1941, the one that Biden quoted last night, is one of the rare States of the Union that people remember. And the reason he quoted that speech was because of the context. That 1941 speech Biden was referring to is known as the Four Freedoms speech. The world was at an inflection point in 1941. It was at war, but the United States was not involved in World War II yet. FDR was making the case for U.S. involvement. And he was arguing that four freedoms were under attack: speech and religion, fear, freedom from fear, and freedom from want. And his point was that these freedoms are being assaulted by insidious forces, fascists abroad and their propagandists here at home in the United States. And it's interesting that, this was Biden's starting point, because Biden went on to make the point that authoritarians abroad, like Vladimir Putin, are a threat to Western democracy. And he talked about him marching into Europe, potentially at some point. And he talked about defenders of Vladimir Putin, defenders of authoritarianism here in the United States. And specifically, he talked about January 6th. This is where he pivoted to the domestic affairs. Talked about the attack on the U.S. Capitol on January 6, 2021, and how Donald Trump, again, he never mentioned Trump by name. He referred to his predecessor over a dozen times in the speech without invoking Trump's name directly. He talked about how Trump sent that mob up to Capitol Hill, how members of Congress have tried to memory hole that day, how Trump has tried to memory hole that day. And it's considered in poor taste nowadays to mention January 6th when you're talking to a Republican, almost like bringing up someone's weight or religion the first time you meet them. Republicans get angry when you talk about it, like that was 3 years ago, it's old news. Well, Biden is trying to make the point that this election is fundamentally about that. This isn't just about tax rates, and it's not just about what social programs you want to see or the size of the federal government. This is about whether we continue to have free and fair elections for the rest of our lives. And so Biden invoked FDR at the beginning of the speech, setting the tone for what I think was an argument that this is a historical inflection point for the United States, and not just over regular traditional policy issues.
And he'll be trying to impress voters with that message for the next 8 months, with this campaign now unofficially underway. But your point is so interesting to read in your analysis, setting up the contrast between Biden and Trump, the blueprint for what we will see in the 2024 election strategy, during which time we'll be having many more conversations, Alex, and I look forward to them. Thank you for the time this morning. Appreciate it as always.